Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as the government order a further 150 million doses of Pfizer and Moderna, is it time for them to level with us about the plans for the vaccine rollout? Has 15 million jabs for freedom become a compulsion to get vaccinated once every 6 months? My digest on this in a moment. And then I let loose my superstar panel, the Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicol. As the man convicted of killing British student Meredith Kercher walks free, Amanda Knox, the figure at the heart of one of the most infamous murder trials of the millennium, speaks out at cruel new attempts to throw her innocence into question. My exclusive interview is coming up at 10:20. Has the BBC gone so woke that it's now a threat to free speech? None other than Peter Hitchens, one of Britain's best columnists, is here to debate with Professor Tim Luckhurst, a former BBC executive, in The Clash. After racism accusations and damning findings against his closest aide in the Cash for Honours scandal, is this the most disastrous week for Prince Charles, maybe since the death of Diana? The journalist who knows him best, royal author Robert Jobson, joins me to analyse In Crown Jewels. Why are hysterical doctors calling for us to be locked up for another year? GB News star Mark Dolan employs the cash hemorrhaging NHS not to inflict more self-harm. That's in The Outsider. And how the hell are almost 10,000 homes in the North East and North Yorkshire still without electricity after almost a week with barely a peep from the mainstream media? Spectator writer James Kirkhope asks, where's the outrage in Uncancelled? Plus, Matt Hancock's pathetic attempts to save his political career futile. Will you ever forgive him? And has the battle over gender reached its lowest point now that even the Science Museum is starting to erase biological sex? My panel will weigh in throughout the media buzz. Plus, we're going to bring you the first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, as always, and we're going to crown this Thursday's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Shame on BT Sport for joining the ridiculous BBC and bowing to the woke mob by dropping Michael Vaughan from its Ashes coverage before he's been found guilty or proven guilty of a thing. Vaughan, you probably remember, was axed by the Beeb after being accused by his ex-teammate Azim Rafiq of making a racist comment over a decade ago. The ex-England captain has repeatedly denied the claim. And it's only Rafiq that has been proven to be a racist, making a string of anti-Semitic comments on Facebook, also over a decade ago. Broadcasters who lap up the ratings from their star employees 1 minute before throwing them under the bus the next make me sick. BT Sport should have actually proven that as a commercial organisation, they were going to make a stand of not giving in to cancel culture. They have failed. My digest on this vaccine conundrum coming up. And then my superstar panel. Here they are, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicol. I'm sure they're going to take me on. But first, before all of that, the news with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Dan. Here's your news just after 9 o'clock. A stepmother and father have been convicted of killing his 6-year-old son after subjecting him to a campaign of abuse. Emma Tustin was unanimously convicted of the murder of Arthur Levin Joe Hughes at Coventry Crown Court. Her partner and Arthur's father, Thomas Hughes, was found guilty of manslaughter. The trial heard Arthur was beaten, starved, poisoned and suffered 130 separate injuries. He died of a brain injury in June last year. A former aide to Prince Charles has been found to have played a part in a cash for honours scandal. An independent investigation reveals Michael Fawcett coordinated with fixers to offer a knighthood and British citizenship to a donor of the Prince's foundation. He was also involved in directing money from a Saudi billionaire to another charity which Charles was a patron of. A new COVID antibody treatment has been approved after clinical trials found Xevudy cut hospital admissions and deaths by 79%. The government has also secured 114 million jabs for booster campaigns over the next 2 years. As Boris Johnson received his booster jab today, he reassured everyone to continue as normal within the new measures.
Most important thing is that people should follow the guidance we've set out, and people shouldn't be cancelling things, and there's no need for that at all. That's not in what we're saying. What we're doing is trying to respond in a balanced and a proportionate way to the arrival of the Omicron variant.
Germany's military have honoured outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel with their highest ceremony for a civilian, a grand tattoo in Berlin. The Bundeswehr Staff Music Corps played a mix of music of her own choosing, including a 1970s punk rock hit by Nina Hagen. After 16 years in office, she'll be succeeded by Social Democrat Olaf Scholz next week. The UK, the European Union and the United States have hit Belarus with multiple coordinated sanctions. The EU says it's targeting the measures such as travel bans and asset freezes at those accused of taking part in a hybrid attack on the bloc. Belarus have been accused of human rights abuses by using migrants as a political tool. And the Duchess of Sussex has won the latest stage of a privacy battle against the Mail on Sunday after its appeal for a full trial had been denied. The publication tried to overturn a decision made by a High Court judge earlier this year not to go to trial. It's after Meghan sued the paper over breaches of copyright and privacy for publishing a letter to her father. The Mail on Sunday is considering escalating its appeal to the Supreme Court. You're right up to date. Let's now get back to Dan Wootton.
The more we learn about the COVID-19 vaccine, the more obvious it becomes to me that using it must be a personal choice. I say this, by the way, as someone with an appreciation of experimental science and a healthy appetite for medical risk. And as a result of that, I've taken the decision to be jabbed. But that was my decision to make, weighing up my personal health profile with the potential side effects. The UK government today admitted it was investigating the risk the vaccine presents to children. But my fear is that still won't deter those in power trying to take your choice away from you, and perhaps eventually from your children. This is despite the admittedly low risk of blood clots from the AstraZeneca jab and the potential increased risk of heart attacks from mRNA jabs, as reported by GBNews, but ignored by much of the media.
Scientists believe they've found the trigger that causes rare blood clots after the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. An international team from Cardiff and the US thinks it now understands how the vaccine can sometimes cause a chain reaction in the immune system.
From 11% at 5 years, risk of heart attack, to 25%. Now, that's a huge increase. If this is true, then it's very concerning indeed. But in medicine, in good science, we never rely on one study. We need to replicate these findings.
Now, I repeat, I have made the decision to be injected. But I respect those who don't, especially parents who don't want to vaccinate their children who have virtually no risk of becoming seriously ill from COVID. But that's not how the media and those in power feel about it, as illustrated by 3 extraordinary interventions today. European Union chief Ursula von der Leyen had the gall to suggest the sick compulsory vaccine law of Austria should be rolled out throughout EU member states. To hell with the consequences to human rights.
Therefore, I think it is understandable and appropriate to lead this discussion now, how we can encourage and potentially think about mandatory vaccination within the European Union.
Germany, already heading in that direction. Today, they decided to exclude the unvaccinated from shops and leisure venues. And it continues this disturbing march towards compulsory vaccines. Meanwhile, back here, LBC's usually brilliant Nick Ferrari, a man who I have great respect for, caused outrage after suggesting Brits who choose not to be vaccinated should be fined.
If it takes time now, the time to fine people, great. Let's start. Let's never go with €100, make it £100, right? And it starts, and I tell you what, it's not 60, but let's make it 40 and above, starting on Monday, OK? Now, if we come round, knock on the door, and you can show on your phone or you've got a letter or something, you've got an appointment, that's fine. But if you willfully oppose now, you're 40 and above, £100 fine in December, £100 fine in January, £200 in February, £300 in March. By the end of the year, you'll be spending about £1,000, and that might cut through your ignorance. Well, it's an idea, isn't it? I don't know what you think.
Surely that's not the British way, Nick. I think one of the fundamental planks of a free democracy is the right to make independent choices about what goes in our bodies. Today, we learned that the government has signed a deal with the mRNA vaccine companies Pfizer and Moderna for a further 115 million doses that will likely see a 4th jab and potentially further boosters across 2022 and 2023. That means we've now secured 453.5 million COVID vaccine doses total, which could see the entire population vaccinated 6 times over. Now, maybe this is a great thing, but it is a long way from the 15 million jabs to freedom we were promised in January. It's even further from the message that being double jabbed will secure the end of lockdowns and return all your personal freedoms. Are we now being asked to be jabbed every 3 to 6 months for the next 2 years? Or is this going to become a regular part of life forevermore, as the chief executive of Pfizer suggested to the BBC today? And does it really matter anyway if most of the developing world, especially the vulnerable, remain unvaccinated? I think it's time for the government to offer us some clear and honest messaging about their plans. Level with us about the future of the vaccine programme. But above anything else, assure us categorically that those who make the difficult personal choice to turn down the vaccine, stick to 2 jabs or refuse the injection for their children are not going to be shunned from society or penalised financially. That would start rebuilding trust with the vaccine hesitant, who are the folk the government want to win over most. To respond, let me bring in my superstar panel. The political commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicol. Dominique, I want to start with you, and actually I'd like you to do 2 things. I want you to respond first to Ursula von der Leyen, and then I want you to respond to Nick Ferrari.
Well, in response to Ursula von der Leyen, I'm just very glad that we left the EU because, in my opinion, we would have had vaccine passports far, far sooner. They've been creeping into England, but they're not here yet. If we were in the EU, we would have had them already. Even in relation to mandatory COVID jabs, we probably would have been inching to that already, as many European countries have, with Austria, Greece, now Germany barring the unvaccinated from public life. This is absolutely disgusting, and you'd think that Europe had learned from history, but clearly they haven't. And I think what a lot of people forget is there are a number of international conventions, for example, with the UN, the Council of Europe, even the Nuremberg Code, that states specifically that people should have informed consent and they shouldn't be forced forced to inject themselves with a foreign substance. They should be able to make decisions about their own bodily autonomy, and that's being completely ripped up. With regards to Nick Ferrari, I don't even know where to start. I was outraged and shocked when I saw this. But
I see the steam coming out of your ears, Dominique, when that video was playing.
I'm trying to keep some composure here because, you know, this is a running theme that I've seen amongst many people who I actually really respect, specifically people on the right. When it comes to our liberties, which, you know, we're at a time where they need to be protected most, people like Ferrari are all over the place. And I'm not being funny. If we want to talk about fines for the unvaccinated, we can also talk about people that are clinically obese, because if you have a BMI over 40, according to Public Health England, your risk of dying from COVID increases by 90%. We could have loads of conversations
And
about
Sean
that.
Bailey, that's the issue, isn't it? This becomes a real slippery slope, because if we start saying to the unvaccinated, you're going to have to pay more, which, by the way, this isn't a fantasy. Nick Ferrari is advocating a policy that has just been introduced in Greece. So this is something very close to home. And if we go down that path, Dominique's right, isn't it? You could have fines if you're fat. You could have fines for drinking more than 20 units a week. You could have fines for smoking. That's not the sort of society we are.
I think where I am on this is the first thing is Britain is where it is today because we are a free-thinking nation. We allow people to make their own choices. Long may that reign. And if you see what's going on in Europe, I'm just glad we've left because I think that's the wrong way to go. Yeah. And if you really
want... God we're out of there.
Thank God.
if you really want the public to come with you, the best way to do it is to give choice. I don't think it's necessary to have compulsory vaccination because if you see the uptake in this country has been very high. And the very communities we want to win over, if they then feel like it's been forced on them, they will double down on their vaccination dodging, as it were.
No, you're
so we need to go
right.
that way. I think the clear thing now, though, the government has given an indication of what it's going to do by buying so many doses. And I'd say this, if we have a rise in the number of infections and we aren't prepared, the government will get slaughtered for that. So being prepared, I think, is the right way to go. But forcing things on people, I don't think is. But yet, nobody has said we will have compulsory vaccination in this country. That's a different conversation.
Amy, you say we might be at a point soon where we may need to force vaccines on people.
I think it's absolutely such a tragedy that we've got to this point where we're forcing people to have the vaccination. But if we look at why is there that vaccine hesitancy? Why is there vaccine scepticism? It ultimately boils down to misinformation. So you're talking about people making an informed choice about their body and what they put in it. I don't believe they are. I think they're basing it a lot on what they see in the media, and particularly on social media. And I think the problem we've got is misinformation being pumped out.
Well, Amy, I just need to clarify something. The UK government today announces it's investigating this link with heart conditions, for example, myocarditis, especially in young men and teenage boys.
So in the same...
So that's a government study. So there's no misinformation on this show. But if you were the parent, and you are a parent, but if you were the parent of a boy and you saw that there's no risk of him dying from COVID, but a small risk of him picking up a lifelong heart condition.
There's a small...
What are you going to do?
There's a small risk of him dying of COVID. We're in a situation now where there is two different risks going on.
Amy is onto something here in one sense. One of the things why you got such great vaccine hesitancy in the black community was an absolute avalanche of misinformation. It came from all over the world. Some of it, to me, seemed quite well organised.
All right, OK.
But you cannot deny that because there's two very strongly held opinions by this, a lot of this sort of kitchen table science is being pumped into communities, which is causing a lot of trouble.
my problem with
and that should be criminalised.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't, because people should have the freedom to say what they... But what's your idea of misinformation, though? This is the struggle that I'm kind of having.
It's the information
so
that's
it's a
put out.
fact that there's a link between the COVID-19 vaccine and heart issues, myocarditis, other issues to do with blood clots. That's a fact. And it's also,
and the mRNA, there is the increased risk of heart.
Yeah, and then it's a fact that people have also died after the shot. It's very, very rare, but, for example, Lisa Shaw, who was a BBC presenter, she died. That was linked specifically to the AstraZeneca vaccine. And her husband's actually come out and said, yes, it's rare, but we want people to recognise us. Sajid Javid, please recognise that we exist. On that very... Can I just finish? On that very premise, it makes no real sense to be forcing people to have an injection when there's a potential they could
they're not forcing anybody to do. They're not forcing anything.
No, but Amy's saying we might need to get.
No, I'm not. I want that to be a total last resort. But I want to look at how we've got to the point where we're looking at maybe mandating vaccines. And to me, that
point are we at,
Dominique, you're looking at what you consider to be the clear science. What I'm talking about is the attack that communities have had. I've seen posts that said black people are immune. I've seen posts that said if you have Irish blood, you're immune. They're the kind of thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right,
but that is what the public are dealing with. They're not scientists.
But the vast majority of the time, people aren't saying that they've got pure blood, so therefore they'll survive.
But when people are getting information
I think you'd be surprised
like that,
what people
when people are getting information like from sources that they trust,
how many people are getting information like that?
If you look at what happened in the black community, a very large majority of the community.
There's also a historical issue with that.
Misinformation is one area, and by the way, I call out the social media companies all the time because I think it's a disgrace what they allow to propagate. And I'm not just talking about misinformation, I'm talking about lots of illegal stuff too. But I think, Amy, in a free society, it's still very disturbing to me that you think there is any possibility that we should enforce jabs. I think that should just be off the table. It should just be ruled out.
I think that if you look at it, a government's responsibility is to protect public health. And if it came down to that, what's the best way to protect public health?
Government's responsibility is also to protect our freedom.
Yeah.
Amy, what I'm trying to find out is, at what point do you think we're at? I'm confused about that.
Because we're not at mandating, but I'm saying I can see how we would go there.
In terms of the health of the nation, because, you know, one of the reasons why we will be better protected against this new variant is because we've allowed our populations to have high levels of immunity already. So that's why I'm confused.
So 20% of people don't want to be vaccinated for various reasons that normally don't really make sense when you boil it down.
I mean,
and I think that's why. But that's why people like Nick Ferrari are getting so irate and saying things like
saying that people should be fined. I'm sorry, it's disgusting.
I don't agree with what Nick Ferrari said.
Supposed to have quite Thatcherite principles would be for.
But I have sympathy for those.
It's a fascinating debate, and we will continue it throughout the night. Dominique Samuel, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, my superstar panel, and they are here for the entire show. Coming up, has this been the most disastrous week for Prince Charles since the death of Diana? The man in the know, Robert Jobson, he's actually been on the road with Charles in Barbados this week, weighs in on today's revelations about his closest aide's role in the Cash for Honours scandal and whether they could blacken Charles's name. But next in The Clash, is the BBC now so woke that it's a threat to free speech? As one of the corporation's bright stars, Michael Burke, lashes out. I've got columnist extraordinaire Peter Hitchens to battle it out with Professor and ex-BBC exec Tim Luckhurst. As ever, I want to know what you think too. Dan at gbnews.uk, and you can vote in our poll at GB News. Back soon.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday, so a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow, but further north, we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north. So these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving. So although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So although, again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away. And then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day. a colder day again as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England. But some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Time now for The Clash. Veteran BBC broadcaster Michael Buerk has called out the Beeb for becoming increasingly woke and for its hopeless yearning to connect with youth, as he fears his ethics discussion show Moral Maze is under threat. Writing in the Radio Times, Buerk said, "In the wider world, and it has to be said in some parts of the BBC, more and more is being put off limits, things that cannot possibly be said, new orthodoxies that are beyond challenge. I do think freedom of speech is seriously under threat." So, even the BBC's own stars are admitting that the organisation is too woke. But is that a threat to free speech? Well, as always, I'd love to get your view, and you can vote on that question now on our Twitter poll at GB News. I'll also read out some of the best comments. So jump into my email inbox, dan@gbnews.uk. To help me make your mind up, though, let me bring in the journalist and Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens, and principal of South College, Durham University, and former BBC executive, Professor Tim Luckhurst. It's great to have you both here. Peter Hitchens, do you agree with Michael Buerk that this wokeness infiltrating the BBC is now putting freedom of speech at threat?
Well, of course it is. The BBC is as important in our society as the medieval church was in the 14th and 15th centuries. It controls so much of how we think, of what we see, of the areas that we're allowed to discuss and the way in which we discuss them, whether it's in news and current affairs or in drama and soap operas, which are immensely important in setting out the kind of ideas which are acceptable in society, and in programmes such as Woman's Hour, and even Doctor Who. A whole set of attitudes are embodied, which everybody feels that they are expected to follow. And so the power of that organisation is huge. And if it does, as it has been doing for some time, simply to leave off the edges quite large numbers of perfectly legitimate positions, so they're never presented, or only ever presented with mockery, then it has an effect. And I think that Michael Burke is right to say that this problem has grown greatly in recent years. In simple personal objective terms, I've found that the BBC, which I used to say to people, my fellow Conservatives, they shouldn't attack too much because the alternative would probably be worse. And also, there were many people of integrity within it who really did genuinely believe in impartiality, has increasingly begun to exclude me. And I've found things I haven't, for instance, been on BBC Question Time, which I've been on pretty much every year since 1996. I came off the show in March 2018. I haven't been asked back since the COVID.
Very telling. Exactly, since you spoke out against the COVID orthodoxy.
Yeah,
Tim Luckhurst.
Most parts of it.
Yeah, Tim Luckhurst. The BBC is starting now to even stop its discussion shows being able to discuss the issues of the day. Surely you accept that your former workplace is really putting freedom of speech under threat.
I don't agree, Dan, but it's an interesting discussion. The BBC is a colossal organisation. It serves a multiplicity of audiences on radio, on television, online, and many of those audiences have different interests. There are bits of the BBC which I think have got a less broad range of ideas represented on them that they used to have in the past. And for that reason, I think Peter, for whom I've got a great deal of respect, he's a brilliant columnist, makes an interesting point. But I think that across what the BBC does online, on radio, on TV, at home and abroad, a huge range of views are represented. I think the BBC's big challenge at the moment is that it's desperately trying to ensure that the licence fee remains relevant. And that means that in parts of its service, it needs to appeal to a younger audience. And that's a younger audience which you might call woke. I think they'd call themselves kind, but I'm a supporter of free speech too, so I understand the concern. But I think, yes, there are areas where the BBC is trying to appeal to a younger audience.
OK, but Tim, can I take the example of Question Time that Peter raised? It's a really good point. If you are someone who is considered right-wing, if you're on Question Time, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be 4 against 1. Plus, you've got Fiona Bruce. We know what side of the fence she's on. It's not a fair fight.
Interesting. I mean, people are very fortunate to be invited onto Question Time. It has a tremendously large audience, and I think it represents a range of views. But it's the classic BBC range of views, and I'm not critical of that. The BBC range of views has always been within the bounds of opinion represented in the House of Commons. It's very much a creature of parliamentary democracy. So if your views don't exist within the spectrum between the centre of the Conservative Party and the centre-left of the Labour Party, then you're probably not going to be popular on the BBC. I can remember defending the right of Nick Griffin to appear on Question Time. I disagree with everything the man has ever said. I think he's an idiot. But I nevertheless thought it was appropriate that he should appear on Question Time. If the point is that the BBC is not taking those risks anymore, I think you might have a point. And I think that's a shame, because I think risk should have...
And Peter Hitchens, the issue is it feels like the BBC are laughing in our face. Peter, I'll let you come in just after making this point.
I need to respond to this, because if Tim's suggesting that the exclusion of people such as me from Question Time is the equivalent to the exclusion of Nick Griffin.
Not at all, Peter. I wouldn't dream of comparing you. You're far too intelligent.
In deep waters. I don't think that's so. I don't believe that I'm remotely comparable to Nick Griffin. The problem is that many people in the BBC think that I am.
Yes,
they think that because I'm a Conservative, I'm a fact.
If that is the case, Peter, they're profoundly wrong.
That is a BBC view. And the other point I should make...
Well, they were outraged about having Nigel Farage on, weren't they? And he's a mainstream figure.
No one can complain on Nigel Farage's behalf that he didn't get a fair crack on Question Time. But that's a different question. What I'm trying to say here is that Tim says that people are very fortunate to be invited onto Question Time. That may well be true. The fact is that I was seen as part of the spectrum and perfectly acceptable every year from 1996 to 2018, and suddenly it stopped. Now, I can't have been that bad if I was invited back that many times. I can have been useless at answering the questions, or a terrible broadcaster, or uninteresting. Something else must have happened. And I've dropped off quite a large number of the daytime midday political programmes, onto which I used to be invited quite frequently. That's gone. The Andrew Neil programme, as we all know, ceased to exist. I can't go on that anymore. I used to be on.
Well, Peter, you know what the issue is, don't you? You know what the issue is, Peter. You are a white man. That's what the issue is.
I can't finish a sentence without. No, if you don't want me on, I can always go away. I've got a perfectly good evening to pursue. If you do want me on, let me finish the sentence. Okay? Deal?
Well, this is a debate, so I'm just having to keep it going, Peter.
I can go any time you like. It's absolutely nothing to me whether I stay on this programme or not. You invited me on. If you're going to invite me on, do not interrupt me in mid-sentence. Is that okay?
Well,
it's just rude, and it makes it impossible to have a discussion or to finish a point.
No, but you're making very long points, Peter, and I'm trying to get both of us to have a discussion.
May I respond, Dan? Would that be okay?
It takes longer than 2 seconds to make. If you want to have Mickey Mouse points made by people who make them in 10 seconds, ask somebody else. But if you've asked me on, do me the courtesy of letting me finish what I was saying. I was listing the programmes that I've been excluded from. I think that Mr. Luckhurst, who insists that nothing's going wrong, needs to address the fact that someone of my position, I'm not Nick Griffin, I'm not some kind of fascist, is being excluded, and since the COVID panic, has been almost entirely excluded. And I have to tell you that this goes back a heck of a long way.
Well, you've made a very long point, so let him respond.
Can't be so complacent to say there's nothing going on.
Thank you, Dan. I mean, I think, Peter, that you're making one mistake. I don't disagree that you haven't appeared recently. I don't disagree that you're a very good broadcaster. I read your column and I think it's fantastic, and I admire your journalism. I think the problem is perhaps the one that keeps me off BBC programmes, and that is your age. The BBC is seeking to appeal to a younger audience. It's not about your politics. It's about your age. Now, that's a mistake, because the BBC ought to recognise that the majority of its licence payers are in fact over the age of 40, that it must appeal to younger audiences, but it can't do so by excluding older contributors, and that in fact it would be a very good idea to have Peter Hitchens of the Mail on Sunday on Question Time, because Peter Hitchens of the Mail on Sunday represents a substantial body of opinion and makes very good points. I'd be perfectly happy to make that case. And if you'd like me to launch a campaign on this programme for Peter Hitchens to appear again on Question Time, I'll be delighted to make that suggestion, provided Peter Hitchens will.
Well, the thing is, I think you're partly right, Tim, but it's the point that I was trying to make earlier is that it's not just because he's old, it's because he's a man, he's a white man, he's a straight white man, and the BBC doesn't really like putting many of them on these days, especially not if you work for a centre-right publication. Peter.
If you'll excuse me, can I respond to this?
Yes, Peter.
Thank you. I reckon I have a very good face for radio. And I don't think that this rule that Tim has just invented applies to this at all. There are many people who are in journalism of my roughly same age and experience as I am, who are on the radio, male and female, who carry on appearing and are actually indeed invited to present programmes. I've never been. This whole discussion arises out of Michael Burke, who's talking about the moral maze and how he thinks that's being narrowed and cribbed and confined. Many years ago, when the moral maze panel was being reconstructed, the then producer thought that I should be part of it, and I was supposed to be given a trial. I suddenly realised the trial was rigged, that I wasn't getting anything like as many gigs as the others, and I made inquiries. I found out that I had been vetoed, that I was never going to pass the trial, I was never going to be on. This is long ago that the BBC took this kind of view. It's nothing to do with age. There are plenty of people my age and older, I'll bet you, on Question Time. They just don't have my politics and my opinions. And it really is. It really isn't about that and never has been. It's about entirely different things. I think it's a dodge, honestly.
Fascinating debate. Thank you for having it. Final quick point to you, Tim.
Maybe it's about being succinct, Peter. I mean, television's a very brief medium. I suspect that if you made your point...
Tim, thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. I don't want to get my head bitten off again, but look, you know I always love having you on, Peter Hitchens. Do come back. And you too, Principal of South College, Durham University, and former BBC executive, the Professor, Tim Luckhurst. Thank you very much to you both. So who do you agree with? Ginger Rob says they've been perfecting the art of polite control, more commonly known as political correctness, for decades now, so he doesn't think it's a new issue. Jane, via the email, I cannot bear to watch any output by the BBC. It does not reflect reality. The woke agenda has distorted everything. And from Glenn, the BBC is simply a publicly funded joke and just so PC and woke, it is simply laughable. Although I, for one, stopped laughing as I feel it's now beyond a joke. I've stopped laughing, believe me. I'm furious that I have to pay that damn licence fee. Your verdict now in, and it's pretty damning. A huge 95% of you agree that the BBC has gone so woke, it's now a threat to free speech. Only 5% of you disagree with that. Coming up, as British student Meredith Kercher's killer walks free, thrusting Amanda Knox back into the spotlight, I'll check in with the woman who suffered the greatest miscarriage of justice of the millennium. Don't miss that. But next, first came the racism allegations. Now his top aide has been exposed for using fixes in the Cash for Honours scandal. And don't forget that embarrassing catnap in Barbados. A terrible week for Charles, but is it the worst since Diana's death? I'll put that to royal author Robert Jobson, who's been on the road with him in Crown Jewels.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Amanda Knox and Mark Dolan on the way, but time now for Crown Jewels with royal editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Jobson. This could turn out to be one of the worst weeks for Prince Charles since the death of Princess Diana. Today, an investigation found his former close aide, Michael Fawcett, worked with fixers to offer a Saudi billionaire a knighthood and British citizenship in return for donations to the Prince's Foundation. Then, on Sunday, The Sun reported Prince Charles had called in lawyers following claims in a new book that he was the royal racist described by Harry and Meghan in their interview with Oprah. A Clarence House spokesman described it as fiction and not worth further comment. And if that wasn't enough, Charles was filmed falling asleep in a ceremony marking the moment his mother's reign over Barbados came to an end. Robert Jobson joins me now. Now, Jobbo, look, you're the journalist who is closest to Prince Charles in the world. You've been with him in Barbados this week. Is this a crisis for the Prince of Wales?
I don't think so. Number one, I'd like to put that thing in Barbados in perspective. It was a solitary moment, which would technically, I think about that stage, it was about midnight in Barbados. That's about 4 a.m. UK time. And he'd flown in and was flying in and out. It was a momentary lapse. I would only say that, and I don't think that it was the end of the world. And honestly, Dan, if you'd been there listening to some of the poetry that was being read out, I'm not sure that you'd have managed to keep your eyes open either. But, you know, it was a momentary lapse there. As for the racist claims, frankly, I just don't believe it's him. And I agree with the Palace on this one. I think that is pretty much a work of fiction. But the Foundation story, it's a bad one. I mean, at the end of the day, one of his closest aides, they don't like him being called an aide because he was, working for the Foundation, but he's been close to Charles for something like 35, 40 years, has been found guilty of really essentially fixing having communications and with fixers over these this knighthoods. It's exonerated other members of the Foundation. It says that Prince of Wales do nothing about it. Don't think that's good enough, really, because at the end of the day, the man was appointed. He was very close to Charles. He had his trust. And this is quite a damning report. What you look at it, you can't just put it all on Michael Fawcett's head. I really think that other people, if they didn't know, should have known.
Well, indeed. And look, Jobbo, I know we obviously want to be able to get behind Prince Charles. He is the future king. But because I've said this to you privately, my criticism is over the fact that he has to grow up now and not allow these scandals to engulf him, because it could be too damaging to the monarchy in just a few years. So do you think that Charles is going to learn his lesson from this and actually start listening to Camilla, his wife, who actually, by all accounts, wanted Charles to distance himself from Fawcett long ago?
Look, the reality here is the Prince of Wales is very grown up. I think what the people around him have to be rise up to their jobs at this moment in time and really show themselves to be absolutely on top of their jobs. We're in a moment of transition. Her Majesty, who's done a terrific job, sterling job, let's hopefully be on the throne long after her 70th anniversary in the summer.
Well, I've said decades, Jobbo. She's there for decades. And people say I'm crazy, and I stand by it.
Well, the bottom line is we are in the moment of transition of the crown. And, and I think that it's very important that the Prince of Wales probably now, he's raised an awful lot of money for charities, done an awful lot of good things in terms of the Prince's Trust, in terms of major achievement, really getting young kids back on their feet to launching businesses around the country. Look, he's done all that. I think it's now time for him to be more kingly in his approach, to ditch the money-raising things.
Exactly.
And to actually focus on being
Jobbo,
a statesman. And I think that he's a very good statesman. I think he makes great points. I think he's well respected. There's no need for him to continue to raise all these hundreds of millions of pounds. Give that to other members of the royal family to take over. It's a shame Harry and Meghan aren't here, because that's the sort of thing that they should have been taking on, to give him the freedom. I frankly think he's a workaholic. I think he does too much, and this element of it shows that perhaps it's time now to really be like the Queen and just to do the things that you need to do as effectively a quasi-head of state.
I think you're completely right. Ditch the money-making, ditch the overtly political speeches. I think that's important too. And we need to see Charles transition, really. This has been a bad week for him. I can't lie. I do think you're right, though, about the fact he's not the royal racist. I think it's despicable that Harry and Meghan have allowed all of the speculation to continue based on a story that was false in the first place. And shame on them. Shame on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really they're play acting and they're damaging the monarchy as an institution that relies upon positive publicity for its very life's blood. And, they've had the best of the years. They've had the best of it. Harry has certainly. And now he's dishing his own father. Now, my feeling here is the Prince of Wales is eminently capable, he's a great man, but I really do think the people around him, the people that support him, from the private sector to the press secretaries to the people that are involved in running his affairs, they've all got to be on top of their game. Not one of them could be below that. We've seen this with the Queen. Very top people.
Exactly. Don't take a risk. It's not worth it. The smallest risk can backfire.
And hundreds of millions of pounds for great causes.
And it's enough.
His Prince's Trust really should be taken on by somebody else. The foundation should be taken on by somebody else. He needs to focus on being a king in waiting and supporting the Queen in the best way he possibly can. And I have absolute faith that he's able to do that.
Yeah, well, look, very good
Camilla
advice.
at his side, they're a very good team. And I think that with William and Kate as well supporting them, we're in a good position now. And we don't want to blow it with silly things about knighthoods for, Arab sheikhs. I mean, it's really not necessary. It should not even be coming up.
It's pathetic. But look, very good advice. I know he respects you, Jobbo, so I hope he listens to that advice. Robert Jobson will speak again next week. Thank you so much. Now, how do you build your life back after being wrongly convicted of murder and becoming one of the millennium's most maligned women? Don't miss my exclusive interview with Amanda Knox live. But next, why are hysterical doctors calling for us to be locked up for another year? GB News star Mark Dolan warns the NHS, push Plan B at your peril. He's here after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday. So a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow. But further north, we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north. So these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving. So although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So although, again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away. And then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day, again, as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England. But some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
The great Mark Dolan is tonight's outsider. Now, the Omicron hysteria was quelled by the World Health Organization, who described the scariant as a mild COVID strain. But still, doomsday doctors want to lock us all up. The General Secretary of the Hospital Consultants and Specialists Association, Dr. Paul Donaldson, was among the experts who said the government not adopting Plan B, which, remember, involves mask mandates and social distancing, would be a bizarre approach that would propel us towards an NHS meltdown. Why are these so-called medical experts so desperate for a return to dystopian lockdowns? Well, the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, Alistair Heath, wrote in the newspaper yesterday, or today actually, that the NHS is the worst public sector offender of using COVID and new scariants as an excuse for its repeated failures. He wrote, Omicron gives it cover to fail to reinstate face-to-face GP appointments, even if that means more non-COVID deaths, and to ignore its enormous backlog. Cancelled Christmas parties and holidays will make its life easier. The NHS wants us to work for it, rather than for it to serve us. So, have the NHS bosses forgotten how they are actually funded? GB News star Mark Dolan joins me now. Mark, you've recovered. Thankfully, you've got your full voice back and you're back here tomorrow at 9 p.m. But it was a sterling effort last Saturday as you croaked your way through that show, I have to say.
Well, thank you, Dan. And I've got so much to say tomorrow, and I've got a lot to say tonight.
Good, well, go. You go.
We all salute the work of doctors and nurses, all of the front line in the NHS. It's been 20 months of hell, working under horrific conditions at times, and no one's denying the fact that the pandemic has had a huge impact on the resources of all health services around the world. But what I'm bothered about is not doctors and nurses, hospital porters. It's the administration of the NHS and the health department who have turned our great health service into the national COVID service. And with that, they have sown the seeds of their own destruction. I genuinely fear for the long-term survival of the NHS in its current form. It is now approaching bankruptcy, and it clearly appears to not be a viable concern in terms of the provision of health for the nation. Let me give you some stats to back up that rather troubling headline, Dan. 740,000 cancer cases, that's almost 1 million cancer cases, may have been missed since the first lockdown, according to the National Audit Office. That could be almost 1 million devastated lives. So many of those cancers preventable, so many of those cancers suffered by younger members of the population, perhaps a young mother of 3 that didn't notice or didn't get a diagnosis for a lump in her breast. So that's a big concern. We have speculation that the waiting list, which is currently around 6 million people, which is, by the way, 1 in 10 of the British public who are on a waiting list, that could double by 2025. So I'm really concerned about the health of the service altogether. And it doesn't help that top medics, high-profile medics, often on social media, are calling for more Plan B measures. Now, we've seen enormous amounts of money thrown at the NHS in the course of the pandemic, and actually, just generally, notwithstanding coronavirus, Britain is now the biggest contributor to its health services in Europe, with 13% of our economic output going towards the NHS. All of income tax goes on the NHS, and yet the service is getting worse. And I agree with Alistair Heath in the Telegraph that COVID is being used as an excuse, and so many bad policies were enacted in the course of the pandemic, self-destructive moves by NHS managers, including, for example, trying to make the NHS COVID secure. Now, what did that involve? That involved cancelling operations and emptying wards. In the end, you're never going to make a hospital COVID secure in the course of a pandemic. Also, medical staff, surgeons, doctors, nurses were sat at home twiddling their thumbs because of the pingdemic. There's no way that it was justified that an anaesthetist should be sat at home symptom-free in the course of a national emergency. So the pingdemic should not have actually applied to frontline NHS workers. What about those GP surgeries that were quite literally chained shut? So much of this is not the virus and not the pandemic, but failed policy, Dan.
I completely agree, Mark. And what the issue is, these folk have got a huge wave of ego as a result of the pandemic. They are being listened to, they're being taken seriously. And we see lots of organisations giving in to their demands. Like, Mark, did you know, I mentioned it briefly on the show last night, those woke-topians at Channel 4 cancelled the leaving do of Jon Snow. You know, he's been on air for 120 years or something, and no drinks for him now because they're worried about Omicron and they don't want to overwhelm the NHS. I say we all have to do the opposite. We all have to stop listening to the NHS when it comes to how we live our lives, because we pay our taxes so they can serve us. And I will continue to be hosting my Christmas parties. I'll be continuing to go out because that's life and that's the beauty of life.
Dan, the NHS was closed for business in the pandemic. They got the policy wrong and we're now paying the price. 750,000 people missing their cancer appointment. Tell me, or diagnosis, I should say. Tell me that that's not worse than COVID. And what I'm really worried about now is a lot of people are borrowing money or causing themselves a financial hardship by going private because they're desperate for an operation or a procedure. And if that many people stop using the NHS and start paying for a private service, the NHS will lose its moral authority. It will be like the BBC, a service that people pay for, but not everyone uses. So I think the policy's got to change. They've got to open their doors and they have to be more sensible in any future pandemic, and they must remain open for business.
Yeah. Mark, do you think we should invite Jon Snow to the GB News Christmas party? He'd have a lot more fun with us, let's be honest.
I think he'd have a real laugh and he'd know what real journalism looks like.
Very good point. Mark Dolan doing brilliant real journalism at 9 p.m. Friday, Saturday and Sunday with Mark Dolan tonight. Mark, great to have you fully recovered. We've got to look out this weekend. It's 10 o'clock, still to come this hour as the man convicted of killing British student Meredith Kercher walks free. Amanda Knox, the victim of one of the biggest miscarriages of justice and the heart of the murder trial of the millennium, on her battle to reclaim her life 14 years on. My exclusive interview coming up. How the howler almost 10,000 homes in the northeast and North Yorkshire still without electricity after almost a week, with barely a peep from the mainstream media. Spectator writer James Kirkup asks, where's the outrage in Uncancelled? Should Matt Hancock just give up politics after his embarrassing apology tour? And has the battle over gender reached its lowest point now that even the Science Museum has started erasing biological sex? My panel weigh in the Media Buzz. Plus, first look at the newspaper front pages hot off the press and revealing today's greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But before all of that, the news headlines at 10 with Karen Roberts.
Thank you very much, Dan. This is your news at 10 o'clock. The polls have closed at Old Bexley and Sidcup by-election. GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is there for us. Darren, what can we expect from the results?
Well, as you say, counting has just begun here in Bexley and Sidcup. That by-election that was brought about by the very sad death of James Brokenshaw, the former Northern Ireland Secretary, a couple of months ago. Now, this is a rock-solid Conservative seat. In fact, it used to be Ted Heath's old constituency. They've got a 19,000 majority here. There is no suggestion, I don't think, they're going to lose this seat. But there is interest in potentially how much that majority could fall by, given the allegations that we've seen, particularly around Tory sleaze in the last couple of weeks. And the sense that I'm hearing tonight is that that majority is likely to be significantly lower because there has been a big drop off in turnout. People, particularly Conservative voters, not turning out to the polls to vote. We're expecting a result in the wee small hours at around 2 a.m.
Thank you very much, Darren. A stepmother and father have been convicted of killing his 6-year-old son after subjecting him to a campaign of abuse. Emma Tustin was unanimously convicted of the murder of Arthur Labinjo Hughes at Coventry Crown Court. Her partner and Arthur's father, Thomas Hughes, was found guilty of manslaughter. The trial heard that Arthur was beaten, starved, poisoned and suffered 130 separate injuries. He died of a brain injury in June last year. A former aide to Prince Charles has been found to have played a part in a cash for honours scandal. An independent investigation reveals Michael Fawcett coordinated with fixers to offer a knighthood and British citizenship to a donor of the Prince's foundation. He was also involved in directing money from a Saudi billionaire to another charity which Charles was a patron of. The sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell has heard how Jeffrey Epstein paid for one of his victims to go to school. The woman, known to the court by the pseudonym Jane, accused Maxwell of setting her up for abuse by Epstein when she was just 14 years old. Juan Alessi, who is Jeffrey Epstein's former house manager, testified that he saw two underage girls at his Palm Beach mansion between 1991 and 2002. He recognised one as Jane and named another as Virginia Roberts. Maxwell denies all charges against her. You are right up to date. Now, back to Dan.
Tomorrow's News Tonight, now in our Media Buzz. First front pages, just in. The Metro leads with, and this makes me angry, maskless. That makes me angry too, Matt Hancock, actually. We'll talk about him in a moment, but no, maskless forced to pay up as 152 passengers were fined, 125 were thrown off London tubes, and 5,100 commuters were told to cover up on day one of the new COVID laws. The thing is about this, the police, if you get mugged in London, don't help you. The police, if you get burgled in London, barely help you. This is a complete and utter waste of time. Deleted, say the I. This is as, also that's not, they say a bit more than that. Deleted, there's a colon. Deleted NHS COVID app use is falling, raising fears over Omicron. This is as the official NHS COVID app has seen its use falling, according to analysis by the paper since the summer pandemic, which has raised fears over tracking the spread of Omicron. Honestly, does anyone still have the COVID app on your phone? I don't. Haven't for a very long time. The Independent features a Syrian mother who it reports is among thousands of Syrians told the UK would take them in. Years later, thus still waiting, struggling to survive, they say. Here's my superstar panel, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicol. Now, we saw him just a moment ago, and I would say, can't Matt Hancock just rack off for 5 minutes? His grim apology tour continued on ITV last night. Oh. Sorry, I can't cope with that faux sincerity. I'm surprised you didn't pull out those crocodile tears like you did on Good Morning Britain. Ugh. Makes me shudder. Remember, he was sacked, of course, for snogging, and there was a lot of snogging on ITV last night because Therese Coffey, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, tried to tell us all not to do it.
Who are you with? Jenny Harris, who says we've got to be cautious when it comes to socialising at Christmas, or the government that says don't change your party plans?
Well, for what it's worth, I don't think there should be much snogging under the mistletoe. You don't need to do things like that.
I mean, Dominic Samuels, the irony is off the scale, isn't it? Because Matt Hancock was snogging anyone going, it seemed, even though he was married throughout this pandemic. So he can rack off with his faux apology, and she can rack off for trying to tell us who we can snog. It's none of her business.
It is none of her business. This is obvious stuff, especially in the light of reports coming out that people in number 10 were apparently having drinks parties. Yeah. They were apparently a COVID nightmare. Clearly, not everyone working for the government was following the rules, and I don't think we should listen to ridiculous things like that, especially when Downing Street has actually come out and said it's actually fine for you to snog people. I just think it's really odd.
Amy Nicol, do you think folks should be snogging strangers this Christmas?
I think that if we're tempted to snog a stranger this Christmas, then just picture that stranger as Therese Coffey, and then you won't want to anymore.
Oh,
you can stay on the safe side. Just to be on the safe side, Dan.
So mean.
I'm not taking any risks this Christmas.
OK, but on a serious... OK, now that you've just slagged off a fellow woman, so at least we know that you're not a feminist, Amy, for her appearance. I think she seems like a lovely woman. But Now that you've just slagged off her appearance.
Have you seen her rendition of Time of Your Life?
Yes, I have.
You maintain she's the lovely woman?
Yes.
OK.
But look, can we just be serious, Amy? Should someone snog a stranger with Omicron on the
I
loose?
think if that individual is married, then they probably shouldn't be snogging any stranger.
No, I'm talking about two single people.
Well, ideally, instead of mistletoe, they can get a lateral flow and hold it up. Maybe do it together, you know.
It's not who you like.
They can be like, I wanted something else, but I'll take something up my nose instead. Like, it's fine.
I just can't deal with the fact that here we are, 20 months on, and we still have government ministers opining on television shows, usually getting it wrong, by the way, about what individual free citizens should be doing. There's absolutely no reason for the government to be telling people whether they should snog a stranger or not.
Well, I side with the Prime Minister and with Boris on this one. He said, don't change your plans, have the Christmas, you know. All of the restrictions we have now, masks, etc., is just to make sure we can have Christmas in a way that we want to. And that's where I am, I think. We do need to do that. Look, I came here on the tube. I came here on the tube, right? And what I noticed was the vast majority of people were wearing their masks, which is a bit of a change from 2 weeks ago.
Well,
Let's just try to keep
because they're about to be fined.
Yeah,
and
I would just like to say, you know, if masks cause you distress, you have a medical exemption. You have a right to self-declare yourself.
But nobody's asking you to wear a mask if that's the case.
Oh, trust me.
Maybe
people go around, they interrogate you, they look at you like you've grown five heads.
The tube.
And I feel sorry for the people that genuinely have health conditions or past trauma that means they can't wear a mask.
I ride the tube 5 days a week. This morning, I did see TfL staff, for once, enforcing the rules. They've been asked by the mayor to do it all along. Only this morning did they bother to enforce the rules. And most people on the train leave you be. If you have your mask on, they leave you be. If you don't have it on, they leave you be.
I've got a solution. Just wear your mask and then you can snog a stranger through the mask on the tube if you like, and we're all...
How about we stop wearing ridiculous, useless, floppy-faced nappies that do nothing?
I tell you why I wear my mask.
Make us all scared.
I tell you why. I'm not nervous about COVID. I'm not in the high-risk category. I think I'll be fine. I've been double-jabbed, all of that. But there's people who are. And if you're in your closed environment and those people feel nervous, help them out.
Well, maybe they shouldn't be on a patch.
And actually,
maybe
I'm sorry. My sympathy is running out. My sympathy is running out. Maybe don't be on a patch.
No, there's people on the tube who need to work for a living. They're not on the tube for fun.
Get a bike. It's more environmentally friendly.
On a
Ride a bike.
note, you know, my mum found out last week that she's quite unwell and she's got to have a very serious operation before Christmas. So that's put me in a completely different headspace now. Because if I get COVID and I give it to her, she can't have the operation.
But that's a given, though. I'm not talking about extreme cases like that. That is absolutely a given. I think it's complete common sense that you would take that approach. I'm just talking about, in general, when the evidence on masks, it is very mixed, especially when people are wearing, you know, the cloth masks and the surgical masks. They aren't very effective. Really, it's a psychological exercise.
Well, then help
as
people
you've
feel
just
good
alluded to.
psychologically.
So for Boris Johnson to say, don't cancel your plans, but I'm going to mandate masks, it's going to make people feel psychologically less...
No,
they're not going to want to go out. That's why they've been...
It's a fact.
Plans have been cancelled. The hospitality industry is complaining.
COVID's here. It's a fact that we have another
It's going to be here for many more Christmases.
Forever, maybe.
And we have to grow up and stop the government ministers telling us whether we can snog someone or not.
But asking people to wear a mask, to help other people feel safe and be safe is not unreasonable. And remember, Boris said, keep your Christmas plans. And by wearing a mask,
he said the same thing last year,
happening.
Sean, that's the issue. Now, look, in his first interview since shooting, his director of photography, Alec Baldwin, claims that he didn't pull the trigger of the gun, which fatally wounded Helena Hutchins on the set of his film Rust. This is obviously such a shocking case, and Alec breaks down, actually, as he opens up about his account of the fateful incident.
She was someone who was loved by everyone who worked with and liked by everyone who worked with and admired.
I think the big question, and the one you must have asked yourself 1,000 times, how could this have happened? Described it as a 1 in a trillion shot, and the gun was in your hand. How do you come to terms with that? It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
Real bullet get on that set.
I have no idea. Someone put a live bullet in a gun, a bullet that wasn't even supposed to be on the property.
God, it really is like a movie. the whole scenario. The interview comes after an affidavit handed over to police said that the ammunition supplier's owner, Seth Kenny, has told investigators the live round might have been from some reloaded ammunition. According to court records, Baldwin was handed the weapon by the film's assistant director, Dave Hills, who did not know it contained live ammunition and indicated it was unloaded by shouting "cold gun." Obviously, a lot more to come on that case. Coming up, does the Science Museum, that's right, the Science Museum, starting to erase gender, mean we've officially lost the war over basic biological facts? The panel will be back in the media buzz soon. But next, as British student Meredith Kercher's killer walks free, I'll check in with Amanda Knox as she attempts to build herself back after almost 12 years to the day since her wrongful conviction.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday, so a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow, but further north we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north, so these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving, so although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So, although, again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away, and then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day, again, as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England, but some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Amanda Knox is the ultimate example of being judged guilty before proven innocent. A disturbing phenomenon sweeping the world these days with worrying frequency, thanks to a combination of dodgy justice and toxic social media. The American spent almost 4 years in an Italian prison aged 22 after her wrongful conviction of the murder of British student Meredith Kercher. That's despite the murder being committed by Rudy Guede, who was granted early release from prison this week. Now that Amanda's married and a new mum, she is fighting back to reclaim her identity. And she joins me now from Seattle. Amanda, your experience would have driven so many people to drink or depression or drugs or suicide. The more I read about your case, the more amazed I am that you had the mental strength to come through it. How did you do that?
I greatly appreciate that, Dan, and thank you so much for having me on here and the opportunity to share my story. I think that I've always had the kind of character of tackling trauma and an injustice head on. And a large part of, one of the greatest traumas has been having my identity stolen in the courtroom and in the media. And I've tried to battle that by putting out my own compassionate and nuanced journalism based upon my own perspective of having been turned into a cardboard cutout of a character. I have a podcast called Labyrinths where I try to do what I did not see in the unethical, bad storytelling that was done about this case. And I try to commit to doing the opposite of how I was treated.
The thing that's so shocking and terrifying for me, and I think for anyone, is that the police seemed to decide very early on that you were the person who they wanted to nail for this crime because they didn't think that you emotionally reacted in the correct way over your friend being murdered. And of course, there are a multitude of reasons for that, aren't there? I mean, this was a woman who you lived with. I presume you were in huge amounts of shock. Can you just explain a little bit about what advice you would give to people who might find themselves in a similar situation?
Well, that's an interesting question because it sort of puts it on the person who might get wrongly convicted, right? And I think that interest
Which is wrong, and I get that's wrong.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this, and I think the one major difference between, my reaction and my other roommates' reaction, say, there were two roommates who discovered the crime scene, was that one of us saw into Meredith's bedroom and the other did not. I did not see Meredith's body. I did not see the bloody crime scene. And so I did not react in the same way as my other roommate. All that said, I've spent a long time unpacking how I've blamed myself for the situation. And I've a little bit internalized the way that the world has sort of blamed me for the suspicion that landed on me. But I finally arrived at a place where I realized that of all the people in this situation who are making choices, bad choices, I was the one whose bad choices counted the least. And if anything, it's the police and the prosecution who should have followed the evidence instead of pursuing a case regardless of the evidence.
Well, look, it was disgusting the way they acted. I mean, you actually provided them the name of the killer very early on, but they were so desperate to nail you, they didn't follow the evidence. I mean, that is despicable. But I think one thing that you find very difficult, although tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it's the fact that your name is still more associated with the murder of Meredith Kercher rather than Rudy Guede, who is the killer.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. It's been a long time that I've been trying to point that out to people, that if you really, really care about what happened to Meredith, then we need to address the actual killer. And the way that this story spiraled out of control and became a morality tale about female sexuality, totally erasing the young man who committed this rape and murder of a young woman, like, it is an incredible injustice, not just to Meredith's family and Meredith's memory, but also to everyone else who got pulled into that story, including me. And, you know, like, it matters what we call a thing. It matters that there are all these, you know, TV shows and books and movies coming out that are one version or another of the prosecution's narrative of girl-on-girl violence, when that is an actual misrepresentation of the realities of violence against women. So, if anything, I really appreciate you naming Meredith's killer, because Rudy Guede should not, like, I should not carry the burden of his crimes.
No, you shouldn't. And what's particularly despicable is he was actually sentenced to less jail time, far less jail time than you initially were. And he's been released. He's been released, Amanda, early from jail just 2 weeks ago. And I'm sorry to bring this up because it must be difficult for you, but yet again, he is trying to point the finger at you, saying in a recent interview with The Sun, I've got blood on my hands because I tried to save her, not kill her. I mean, he's lying, and his lie is being carried again all around the world. And again, he is trying to smear your reputation. Do you want to respond to him?
You know, I don't think that he is. I reacted to his release from prison in a podcast episode for Labyrinths, in which I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I tried to give him I had hoped that he had at the very least rehabilitated in this time period. And what I have found is that because the prosecution and the police chose not to charge him and find him fully responsible for this crime and pursue a case against him that let him off the hook for the sake of advancing a prosecution against two innocent people, they let him know that he doesn't have to take responsibility for his actions, and that he can continue to exploit the public's and the criminal justice system's fascination with me for his own benefit. And so I think that yet another insane injustice about this case is this sense of not closure. The fact that Rudy Guede was never actually found fully responsible for Meredith's crime simply because the prosecution decided to let him off the hook for the sake of pursuing a case against innocent people.
No, it's completely wrong. And I think what he said was really despicable. I know it's very painful for you, Amanda, that you still haven't had a reconciliation with the family of Meredith Kercher. You want to be able to visit her grave because, of course, she was a friend of yours and you were never able to properly grieve, I imagine, for her. Why do you think the Kercher family has been reluctant to have that conversation with you, given that they must now know that you are completely innocent?
Well, again, I don't want to speculate or sort of give voice to what's in their hearts and minds, because I also understand that this is the most traumatic experience of their life, and that they were told a story at the very beginning when they were the most vulnerable, that the guilty person was me. And so the first sort of sense of closure and understanding that they received, that is potentially the only good feeling that they can feel about this terrible tragedy, is that there's a name and a face to it. And so I understand how the criminal justice system in Italy failed them. And it failed them in a big way because it gave them this sense of doubt, even about what the truth is and what justice should be. So if I put myself in their shoes, I understand. And I don't want to put them in a position where they feel like they have to respond to me, because they don't. This is their pain. It's deep, it's real, and it's more than mine. So I just feel like I want them to know that I think we could achieve a lot of healing and support for each other if we found a way to reconcile and to find our common grief through this immense tragedy.
Well, I hope they're watching, because I think if they did, they would understand why that would be so important to you. Look, Amanda, you have spoken about wanting to reclaim your narrative, and I think this is something that's really interesting, actually. I've spoken about it on the show a lot with a number of high-profile women who have become the centre of a media storm and feel like they've lost control of who they are. So Monica Lewinsky, Carol Baskin of the Tiger King, Sarah Palin, even the former vice presidential candidate. For you, you've been able to do it. I mean, you're a mum, you're happily married, you work on the Innocence, for the Innocence Project at times to try and help people in a similar situation to you. Do you feel like people are starting to understand the real Amanda Knox finally?
That's an interesting question. Being on the show and being welcomed by you to be here and tell my story gives me a feeling like, yeah, maybe that's the case. It's definitely felt like it's been a long, long work in progress of trying to claw myself out of a grave of public opinion. And it's true. Like, the concept of people being guilty before proven innocent in 2011 it's been a long time coming, and I think it's getting potentially worse because we find ourselves allying in really like black and white thinking. So I feel like we are arriving at a place where we're reconsidering these black and white stories that have been fed to us by the media for a long time. But at the same time, Carol Baskin was, a year ago that people were gleefully going out in the streets, like doing dance moves to a song about her being guilty of the murder of her husband. So I think that we need to be careful. We need to be mindful of when and how we are judging other human beings and recognizing their humanity, despite the fact that there's an easy narrative that's placed right in front of us.
Beautiful words. Amanda Knox, let's stay in touch. Hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Coming up, where is the outrage over nearly 10,000 homes in the northeast and North Yorkshire still being without electricity almost a week after Storm Arwen? Imagine if this were in London, for example. Spectator writer James Kirkup has been sounding off about this, and he'll be here soon. But next in the Media Buzz, why has the Science Museum erased biological gender after woke lobbying? And is Spotify Unwrapped the most shameful modern Christmas tradition? We'll be exposing owls to the nation after the break. Don't skip it.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories. with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight now on our Media Buzz. The front page has just been delivered. A bruise for every day of lockdown. The Daily Telegraph reports on the horrific killing of 6-year-old Arthur Lavigno Hughes, who was tortured, poisoned and eventually beaten to death by his father and stepmother. It reports authorities missed a string of opportunities during lockdown to save his life. The Sun also carries this tragic case on the front and asks, did they learn nothing from baby P? Safeguarding expert warned nothing has changed since the failures of baby P, who died in 2007 after suffering more than 50 injuries over an 8-month period. More bad news for Labour, meanwhile, on the front page of The Guardian. Their headline, blow for Starmer as biggest union backer cuts funding for the party. Unite will slash donations and divert the money to different union campaigns, with new General Secretary Sharon Graham saying, I'm not sure we're getting the best value for it. She said the party should talk about workers and defend communities more. Make your mind up on Christmas, demands the Mirror. The paper reports festive plans are in chaos after Number 10 gave conflicting messages over the festive parties. Boris Johnson says they should go ahead. A business minister wants them scrapped. My panel back now, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicole. The Science Museum has bowed to woke pressure after complaints its newest boy or girl display excludes transgender people. The exhibition, which covers subjects like hormones and chromosomes, in other words, science, will now be altered to update non-inclusive narratives. Despite the display already making mention of topical issues like feeling being born in the wrong body, the museum faced complaints about limited mention for transgender issues. In its current form, the under-review display includes an information panel which states that sex usually refers to someone's biological characteristics, whereas gender is more difficult to define. Maya Forstetter, executive director of the campaign group Sex Matters, said the Science Museum should reflect biology. Sexual reproduction evolved over 1 billion years ago and it has not changed in recent years. Sean Bailey.
I think the last comment says it all. It is the Science Museum, so they should be talking about science. And in a rush to be inclusive, and of course we should be inclusive, they've actually excluded the vast majority of people who will look at that display and want to see the sort of how they identify themselves, what's going on in their trousers, as it were. And I think they've stepped away from that. And it just shows you actually how political this has become. This isn't about science. This is about being woke. This is about being right. This is about them being able to tell the correct story when they go to a dinner party. What they're really doing is ignoring the inalienable fact that sex, biological sex, reproductive sex exists, and they should reflect that above any organisation because they are the Science Museum.
You think you're being totally wrong there, because science validates trans people. Science observes the complexity of biology and looks at exactly this. Right, you have your sex right at the start, but then what about your brain development? That's when things change. That's when you can have a trans experience. That's what we're looking at. But can I just say, you lot are being naughty again. You're being naughty again, Dan Wootton, because the Science Museum hasn't done this yet.
Yeah, but they're going to.
They're looking at it. They're looking at it.
They're going to.
The changes haven't taken place. They've been responding to tweets all day saying, whoa, 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 we're just looking at this.
Yeah, but
we know what looking at it means, Dominique.
It means changing it. And this whole thing about sex and gender, the trans lobby seems to keep wanting to differentiate. Yes, of course, there is a difference between biological sex and gender. However, the two are intertwined and they're linked, which is why generally when we talk about sex and gender, we use the two terms interchangeably. For example, men and women have different hormones. Like, for example, men have high levels of testosterone, which is partly used to explain why men are overwhelmingly represented in crime statistics, because men are more violent. They just are in comparison to women. There are differences between men and women that affect the way we behave. And let's just accept that. I agree trans people exist, but when you allow this sort of cultural trend to pervade science and invade science to make a political point. I don't think it's right at all.
I think the existence of transgender people is not a cultural trend, and that's why it should be.
But this is the science. Hold on, it's about the physical differences between being a boy and a girl.
This is what kind of frustrates me with this whole argument, because the science actually looks towards, like, it's archaic to look at science
it's not
in a way that doesn't include trans people.
It's not archaic. It's an inalienable. It's an inalienable fact.
It's not an inalienable fact.
Our biology has men and women, and that's how we
about as
reproduce.
inalienable fact.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing. What's important about the Science Museum? This exhibition is about sex. The sex that we have, how we reproduce. It's not about sociology, and nobody's saying that trans people don't exist. Nobody's saying that they don't have rights. What we are saying is you can't ignore science for a trend
and remember,
gender.
they had already included the fact that not everyone felt like they are born into the right body. So I feel they were absolutely already including trans people. But look, I want to move on to talk about what your 2021 sounds like. Did you fall back in love with a past favourite artist, sample a genre you've never listened to before, or binge far too much of a band you're too embarrassed to admit publicly? Well, yesterday, and I have to say this is one of my favourite days of the year, right? Spotify released its 2021 Wrapped to its millions of users, and that reveals the top music streamed globally for the past year. But the reason I love this moment so much is because you also learn about your own music taste. And I always think looking at someone's Spotify Wrapped gives me a lot of information about what I really like. So I'm going to unwrap my panelists. So these are Dominique's top artists. Oh, look, some goodies in there. But her number one this year, this man, Kanye West.
You know where to find me. They cannot define me, so they crucify me. House of flames when I leave. Come and purify me. Come and sanctify me. You the air that I breathe. Ultra light beam.
Kanye, Dominique, right?
Yeah, I love Kanye
Still
West.
love him, standing by him.
I loved his album. But I will say, I did start listening to some new people. I discovered Rod Stewart this year.
I like it, you boomer.
Rod
Stewart? As if I discovered Rod Stewart.
Sexy. That one. I love that song. So
Okay,
he's going on tour. We should go.
Let's move on to Sean's top artists. Here they are. Oh, look, quite a good mix there. 07 Bill Withers. Look, I might get in trouble for this, Sean. I'd never heard of your number one, but let's have a listen.
Simone?
Let's have a listen. No, this is his number one.
You a treat, that's right. You a snack. Fighting with your jeans, cause you got it like that. Well, okay, tell me what y'all fake. Mad about the date. Now I'm great, cause I remember when I ain't have a wait on a date. Only had enough to pay for matinee. Now I'm straight every morning.
That is sickeningly cool, isn't it?
Sean, that's not my taste. That's not my taste.
Do you know why I love him?
it.
Because I've been a hip-hop fan for years, and sometimes it gets a bit extreme, misogynistic, violent. This is the right heavy beat, but with clean lyrics.
Good family fun.
And a real talk about life.
I like
it. Really
it.
talks about
Kind
life.
of
Look, here are
sexy as well,
Amy's
isn't it?
top artists.
Yeah.
Lots of range with Amy. I'm a bit more on board with Amy. Look, Rolling Stones, Taylor Swift. But here's her number one, someone who I'd also never heard of, called Everything. Amy, are they a successful band?
I love that we're playing everything on GBNews. This is amazing.
Well, let's bring
yeah,
it
they are
back.
successful.
Let's bring it back to my amazing music, right? I've got the best taste in the world. Look at that. Alana, she's usually at number one, but I'm sure you guys can guess this year who took the
Is it
top spot.
ABBA?
ABBA.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, you know me so well.
I believe it would be fair to say you look bewildered, and you wonder why I'm here today, and so you should, I would.
ABBA, still number one. Oh, come on, they had the best comeback possibly ever.
They were good, but Nina Simone is the best
comeback.
songwriter ever. Just a musical genius.
OK, well, look, I think we've got good music taste. I'd love to
think
hear
we
about
do.
yours. Thank you so much to my superstar panel. Do stand by Dominique Samuels, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, because coming up, the crowing moment of the show as I coronate today's greatest person and Union Jackass. The next in Uncancelled have the elite showing contempt for the North yet again by allowing tens of thousands of people to stay in darkness for almost a week. James Kirk up here in just 30 seconds, but first, here's what's coming up in Monday's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight is protect the NHS, one of the most dangerous slogans of all time. Positive Professor Carol Sikora weighs in. One of the most outspoken figures from the world of politics and showbiz, Christine Hamilton, joins my superstar panel alongside social commentator Esther Kraku and The Eye's senior reporter Benjamin Butterworth. Plus, Carol Malone sounds off in Uncancelled. GB News star Neil Oliver gives his take on the state of the world, and I'll preview the race for Christmas #1 with one of its contenders, S-Club star Joe O'Meara. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. It's been 6 days since Storm Arwen battered northern England and Scotland, leaving more than 240,000 homes without power and 3 people dead. Tonight, around 16,000 homes still don't have electricity. And in County Durham, in the last couple of hours, it's been declared as a major incident. How can this happen? And why the hell hasn't more of this been made in the mainstream media? You know why. They're London obsessed. My next guest, director of Social Market Foundation, James Kirkup, puts it perfectly in a new article for The Spectator, where he writes, some people in Northumberland wonder what would have happened if thousands of people in North Dorset or Norfolk, or imagine it, North London, had been cut off without power and water for 4 days and more. Would the armed forces have been mobilised? Would ministers have rushed to speak in Parliament? Is it remotely conceivable that such a situation could have gone almost entirely unnoticed in the imperial capital, London? Yet, that is what has happened these past few days in the place I still consider home. And James joins me now. James, I think you're completely right, and it's an outrage that the vast majority of the media, and I exclude GB News from this because we've obviously had our reporter Rachel Sweeney on this all week, but so few people are talking about what is an absolute crisis, and I think the lack of coverage is a scandal.
Me too. I mean, I think it's a sort of, it's a media problem. It's a political problem. It says a lot about the way the country functions. I think on the media point, there are good reasons for it. Like you, Dan, I'm a former newspaper journalist. I, for over a couple of decades, watched as particularly newspapers, for budgetary reasons, had to cut back their regional bureau, stopped sending district men out into the country, and journalists retreated behind their desks and stayed at Twitter all day. But it does mean that the further from desks and Twitter you are in the country, the less likely you are to get real coverage.
No, I completely agree. And I think it's a real shame, though, that you don't have the BBC standing up to say a story like this is incredibly important, because you just know that if this happened in London, it would be dominating the news. And James, I think this is a phenomenon we're seeing more and more. Take, for example, the recent car bomb attack outside Liverpool Women's Hospital. There was a press conference that afternoon, hours after the bomb exploded, hosted by the Prime Minister, where not one journalist asked the PM any questions about that car bomb. Now, do not tell me that if a car bomb had exploded outside Westminster, it would not have dominated that press conference.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And it's funny that we spend a lot of time talking about the politics of levelling up and digesting the meaning of the 2019 general election, the Brexit referendum. Some of which was surely the fact that a lot of people from bits of the country away from the southeast feel quite unhappy about the way power and attention is distributed around the country, and the way the economy works, the way the politics works. And I should point out, we're here originally to talk about Northumberland, where a lot of my fellow Northumbrians are still pretty cold and miserable tonight. I'm talking to you from South London, so who am I to talk? I live in London because I want to do the sort of job involving media and politics, and to do that, I had to come to London. And because this is where the conversation is. It would be nice to think that one day we get back to a point when the next me from the next generation doesn't have to leave Northumberland and can stay and do this stuff and be heard. Because frankly, if I was still in Northumberland, I wouldn't be writing that article for the Spectator. I probably wouldn't be on. I wouldn't have the little platform I get if I'd stayed there, which is a big media problem. You on the BBC, but to be fair to the BBC regional journalists have done a really good job of covering the story we're talking about in Northumberland and elsewhere. And they've been in my parents' village. They've been round and about. I think the questions are at sort of national output level as to how much national importance is given to the story. There are good local journalists on the ground. It's just and some of them I know are frustrated that the story is not getting more national airtime. But it's the at national level the problems come in.
No, I completely agree. And James, people in the north are becoming increasingly disillusioned with the mainstream broadcast media as a result, aren't they? I mean, I've seen a lot of polling on this very issue, and they do not feel anymore like most of the media represents them.
I'd be interested to look at the polling. I mean, speaking as somebody, I spent the first 20-odd years of my life in Northumberland. I've been away for the next 20-odd. I've got to say, certainly the bit of North Northumberland I'm from, London always felt like it was a long way away. The BBC, the national media, always felt like they were a long way distant. So, I think I'm sure. I think the trend I've talked about, the sort of the withdrawal of regional reporting, the increasing focus on social media, on metropolitan concerns, I think has definitely added to it. But we should bear in mind there's always been an issue. It's always the London media has always been a long way away from places like the one where I grew up.
No, indeed, and it has to James Hancock. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Uncancelled. But it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Let me bring my superstar panel back in. The political commentator Dominic Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicol. Dominic, do you want to kick off with your Greatest Britain nomination?
So my Greatest Britain is cinema and co-owner Anna Redfern for her heroic efforts to keep her cinema open. It's an independent cinema open. In the midst of the vaccine passport scheme that's been launched in Wales. Now, because of a court order, she's been forced to close her business despite efforts to keep it open. But I just wanted to lend my support because vaccine passports are discriminatory, they are wrong, and I'm just so glad there are business owners out there trying to battle against this, although they don't gain very much.
Good on her. Sean Bailey, who are you nominating?
My Greatest Britain is former Labour Home Secretary David Blunkett, who said that Radio 4 has become too woke, that they've forgotten about entertainment, they've forgotten about half the country, that they don't do any jokes anymore, and most of the presenters think jokes are optional and hectoring and posturing is what should be done. And he said the hectoring left have taken over Radio 4.
Yeah, very true. Amy Nicol, your nomination for Greatest Britain.
So my nomination this week is Labour MP Jess Phillips for her absolute annihilation of Matt Hancock on Peston. And if you haven't seen it, I suggest you go and catch up.
Well, look, let's have a look now.
Oh, we've got them. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Let's go.
What an absolute load of rubbish. Did anybody else's friends get a contract? Mine didn't. None of my friends are on those lists. And the reality is, you don't remember what it was like. Well, I do remember exactly what it was like. And there are PPE providers in my constituency that had lorries driving in from Italy to take it when I was trying to get through on those lines that were given to members of Parliament. And so I watched lorries take personal protective equipment out of my constituency while my care homes were ringing me and asking if I could go to the local school to borrow goggles. And all the while, we don't know what...
Full ownership, I believe that is called.
Well, all right, good choices, but I am going to go with David Blunkett, actually, Sean Bailey's nomination, because I think he's actually shone a light on the woke...
It's almost like you don't like the BBC.
Well, I think what was interesting about this, Amy, is David Blunkett is someone who you would consider to be a traditional supporter of the BBC, and that's why I wanted to choose him as the Greatest Britain, because I think it was brave of him to call it out. Let's move to Union Jackass now. Dominic Samuels, who are you nominating?
Mine is Angela Merkel for her effective lockdown of the unvaccinated, barring them from public life, and there may even be mandatory vaccines in Germany. You'd think they'd have learned from history, clearly not. This is so wrong, but I think the only good thing about this is that it will have woken some people up. Whether you're vaccinated or not, surely you can see that this is wrong. You know, it's not about division, it's about calling out discrimination.
Very good choice. Sean Bailey, who's your Union Jackass nomination?
My Union Jackass is knife crime, and the fact that we have now here in London crossed the 28 mark, teenagers murdered with the knife crime, which is just a horrific mark. It's a record here. And of course, in Liverpool, they had the very horrific case of a 14-year-old stabbing to death a 12-year-old. It's a problem for the whole country. We need to get on top of this to keep our children safe.
That is awful.
Very, very good point. Amy Nicole, on a lighter note, your Union Jackass nomination?
So I can't remember what swear words we're allowed to say at this time, so I'm just going to go with the little rascal that is the elf on the shelf. Is a problem for the whole nation.
Explain this to me, because I was hearing about this phenomenon earlier today. I'm not across it, really.
So it basically makes the pressure of remembering stuff every day throughout December, and it's driving me insane, and I've developed...
But you move this little elf around every day for your
You do not.
son.
The elf moves...
Elf on the shelf.
Oh, my goodness, I see.
But you kind of have to instruct the elf a little bit, don't you?
So confused.
I'm confused.
Every single night for 25 days.
And he just moves himself around.
Yeah, but I have to remind him, and I forget, and then it ruins my child's day.
OK.
Right.
I'm following you now. I'm following you.
It's just a scourge on parents
Look,
everywhere.
that's a lovely choice, but I'm sorry, Dominique is completely correct on this. Angela Merkel. What a way to end your reign as German Chancellor. I'm going to mandate a medical treatment for all my citizens. How grim. Sad end.
Yep.
Sad end. But thank you so much to my brilliant superstar panel. Sean Bailey, Dominique Samuels, Amy Nicole. We'll see you again next week. I'll be back again on Monday, of course, from 9 o'clock. Thank you so much for being with us all week. Mark Dolan is here for the next 3 nights at 9 o'clock. But Headliners is next. I'm going to have a great show. See you Monday. Good night.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Wet weather moving in overnight, and that's going to hang around across parts of the south for a time on Friday, so a dull, damp day for some here tomorrow. But further north, we should see some brighter skies returning. The wet weather tonight is coming from this tangle of weather fronts tied into a low pressure that's well to the north. So these weather fronts are not particularly active, but they will be bringing some damp weather already across Northern Ireland into western Scotland. Hitting the colder air, there could for a time be a bit of snow across parts of Scotland, and even further south through the early hours over parts of northern England, maybe even as far south as the Midlands. A little bit of snow is possible before it turns back to rain. It's turning back to rain because milder air is arriving. So although it's pretty cold out there this evening, temperatures will actually rise through the night. So although, again, still perhaps a little bit of snow across East Anglia in the southeast early on in the morning, it will quickly turn back to rain. And a dull, damp morning for East Anglia and the southeast. Turning a bit drier for a time across the south, but then more rain coming into the southwest later on. Meanwhile, much of northern Britain dry and bright with some good spells of sunshine for northern England, Northern Ireland, most of Scotland. There will be some showers in the west. A milder day, particularly in the south, where double digits are likely. During Friday afternoon, though, that wet weather returns to the southwest and spreads further north into parts of South Wales, maybe as far north as the Midlands. Certainly a wet evening on Friday across the south coast. That rain scoots away. And then we're looking at showers coming in more widely during the weekend. So Saturday is going to be a showery day, a colder day, again, as the winds pick up from the northwest. Quite a stiff and chilly wind blowing then through Saturday. The showers will mostly be of rain, but some snow is likely over the hills of southern Scotland and northern England. And quite a wet day across parts of eastern England. But some sunshine for central Scotland and parts of the southeast staying dry, but it will be colder again. Colder again on Sunday as well, but a dry day for most. Just a few showers keeping going across eastern England.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
GBviews@gb